Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Here You Are podcast. This podcast is about life's journeys, big and small. I'm your host, Alex Wiseman, and together we are going to explore stories of resiliency, growth, self-discovery, hope, and everything in between. This passion project comes from a deep belief that storytelling works. And sometimes we need to hear from someone who has a story even somewhat similar to ours that we're going to be all right. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's dive in together.
Full disclosure, I am constantly learning. I think this is a great thing. If I thought I knew everything, I believe I would be in the wrong field. Keeping a curious mind without judging myself for not already knowing something is a delicate balance and takes intentional effort, but it allows me to grow as a helper in this world. When I first learned about dissociation, I thought, yeah, this is something I have done when I've been overstimulated. What I didn't realize is the stigma that was attached to dissociation, even within the therapeutic world. When I began to hear stories shared by people with DID, I realized there was a lot I didn't know about the quote-unquote disorder, and that mass media had gotten a number of things wrong. Before you run to the DSM-5, if you want to learn more about dissociative identities, systems, and DID, see the list of attached resources at the end of this article. To oversimplify things, dissociative identity disorder, otherwise known as DID, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, is a mental health condition where a person experiences two or more distinct identities or personality states, often arising as a survival mechanism to cope with persistent trauma that begins in childhood, 6 to 8 years of age usually. During this time, the unconscious strategy of dissociative identity disorder, or other specified dissociative disorder, OSDD, is developed. Ongoing research is exploring if this age range starts even younger than age 6. It is important to note this can include any relational trauma that the child cannot cope with in any other way. Also, two children can experience the same abuse or neglect. Physical or sexual abuse don't have to be present, and one might develop DID and one might not. A few months ago, I shared a post seeking out stories of hope, inspiration, resilience, or anything along those lines. I am a firm believer we can learn so much from each other, in addition to the other ways we grow through life's circumstances. Charlotte replied to my post and wanted to share a message of hope, one that reminds people you are not alone, and to find support in connection and community. Note, Survivor is a DID system and may use we, I interchangeably. We refers to the collective of parts. Charlotte is a 43-year-old who is completing a Master's of Social Work. With courage, she shares her story of trafficking from infancy to age 29 and continuing to experience abuse until age 37. She tells her story of exploring dissociative identities and connection through community. When Charlotte's trafficker, who was a family member, died, it took 5 months for her to realize something was not right. She noticed that months had gone by without knowing what had happened during that time, and then she sought therapy. The next day, the world went into COVID lockdown, allowing her time and space to heal from her experiences. During the initial stages of our conversation, Charlotte mentions many privileges and oppressions that contextualize her stories. Charlotte, thanks so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate you being here with me to chat.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'd like to invite you to start anywhere that feels natural for you, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks. So I was born into sex trafficking and kept in it and in abuse for 37 years. And I survived through dissociation and now live as a dissociative system. When I learned about my system in therapy about a year after my trafficker died, I thought I was insane. I couldn't talk about what I wanted to in therapy or really much at all. And it felt to be important that my therapist stuck with me while we were together and figured out what was going on. I didn't know why it was important at the time. I was both terrified of being around her and desperate for her help. In hindsight, it makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. I want to ask, what do you want listeners to know about dissociative identities or systems?
So everyone uses different language when it comes to dissociative systems or DID, and we use dissociative systems. People present in different ways because each system develops under unique circumstances. The abuse that a child faces and the circumstances around it will dictate how each part is protective and their initial role within the system. But while there are some overarching similarities across systems, it's much more nuanced and varied than how it's often portrayed in film, television, and even academia. So for us, a lot of the time we feel like ourselves, and only as one part is kind of the main one out in the body at a time. But we do experience something called passive influence a lot. And this is when we'll hear or sense or physically feel other parts of us, depending on what's going on in our environment. We could even move or speak in ways that we normally wouldn't, but that part of us would like us to do that. So as we work on building communication, compassion, and cooperation amongst the parts of our system, this passive influence is more intentional, predictable, and functional. We also sometimes experience amnesia to varying degrees across different parts and over time. So amnesia helps to keep information separated between the parts of us as not to overwhelm any one part. And then the passive was particularly helpful to ensure day-to-day functioning while abuse was happening. But now in the present time, amnesia can be not so much as helpful in that it can prevent awareness of events, emotions, and daily activities. Amnesia in present time can decrease as therapeutic work between the parts takes place. And the most important thing that I'd like people to know is that people with DID are just people. We're not harmful or criminals as media portrayals may lead you to believe. And we're able to heal and live fulfilling lives if given the opportunity to do so. Our brains just simply happen to develop differently due to being abused.
You make such important points, and it's such a breath of fresh air to hear someone speaking their truth about their circumstance. I'd love to know, how did therapy help you navigate this time in your life?
So my therapist mentioned DID to me after a while in therapy, and I remember thinking, what? Had a little bit of an understanding, but not really much at all about what it was. So once I started learning about it, nothing really felt off. It felt right. But there was also a really big push to not believe that it was true. And that resistance was all the work of my protective parts. And there was so much that I was unaware of, and it all just started coming up. And it went against the way that I had been living up until then. So therapy helped each of us collectively identify what each of our parts' perspectives were about each other, our past and our present. And generally, our therapist was someone external to our system who was as consistent an anchor as possible to the present for us, so we could always come back to that. And we still rely on her today for that.
And it's so important for us to have those anchors, right? So, when you first became aware of your system in therapy, you mentioned feeling like you were quote unquote insane. What helped you move from that place of fear and confusion toward acceptance and advocacy?
Yeah, well, facing the fact that something is happening here, I was thinking like I can choose to listen to myself and choose to lean into what seems terrifying, or I can stay here where I am, but I know that I couldn't stay there. It probably took about 2 years or so to be accepting enough of being a system and the causes that led to being a system, and going back and forth and in circles all around about that. And that process was important because even if me accepted our system and our circumstances, it didn't mean that anyone else in my system did. And if I tried to move forward, others who weren't ready to made that very, very clear through a number of different ways that anyone could communicate something. So when engaging with outside people in life and learning how to relate with others as a system, every time I met someone, it felt like a test of sorts. So I would think, are you someone that we can start being present with? Because that's how important it felt to be visible to others, while also being really unsure about how people would respond to us and what being more authentic would feel like. Our system is mostly all hidden, which is purposeful, that no one can really see it or tell. And this is very true for myself because growing up, like I went to school, I did activities, played sports and all that stuff. So no one would think, or sorry, so everyone would think that my life was normal. Nothing was wrong or different. Everything was hidden in plain sight. And at times it gets hard to understand when parts are trying to be protective through hiding, because while it may have been protective when the abuse was taking place, it doesn't necessarily feel helpful now. And that runs really deep, and it shows how much protection was needed in my lifetime and that those parts are still there. So understanding and having compassion for these protections has really helped us begin to address our underlying fears of being seen. Experience outcomes in the present and noticing how they're different than they were in the past has also helped us to be increasingly confident about who we are, our relative safety in our current life, the value of internal and external relationships, and our ability to engage and even enjoy life.
Thanks for sharing that. I'm now wondering if you've noticed a change in the last 5 years. What has that been like?
Yeah, so yes, the first one. And there's been a ton of positive change in the last 5 years, which really isn't that long compared to my whole lifetime. But we're more aware of each other, and we're being more who we were meant to be, learning who we are. We're choosing things for ourselves and experiencing life, and it's very, very cool and also very, very overwhelming. So pacing has been really key to not burning out. I've also found an online community that had people talking about experiences that was similar to mine, and to different parts of my system. And I say terrified a lot, but I really was terrified at first to engage in this community. It was the first place where we started engaging with external people about DID, and even before telling our husband or any friends or anybody. And it took about a year or so to start talking in the community after joining it in Zoom groups. It was scary, but not terrifying. And I started talking in small, teeny tiny steps, feeling emotions and physical sensations in even smaller steps. And we're still practicing this. Now I have regular Reiki sessions and shamanic healing, psychotherapy, exercise, all different things. I tried things in therapy and elsewhere to help us feel safe in a world that we learn can be safe enough, but still have many stressors. So eventually we found a voice to say yes or no to what was helpful for us at any time. Learning that it's okay to have a unique and ever-changing path. People who cared about me, they stayed, and boundaries were, or they really honestly continue to be negotiated with people who weren't able to be as supportive. But feeling care from others, it was really hard, terrifying, and it's still hard, but it also feels the acceptance and validation that we need to know that we're living life how we want to. And I also want to emphasize that all of the change that we've experienced over the last 5 years was not straightforward and not easy. It's challenging to communicate in words just how difficult it's been, especially when you believe that you're the only person who's going through what you are, and especially when you're even uncertain about what exactly it is you're going through in the first place. And change still happened in a way that we hoped that it would. We can look back and we can see that change, and we have supporters now, like our therapist and our online community. and our husband, who remind us about all of that when we need reminding. So for the first time, we can recall. We're looking forward to the future because we know that we have the autonomy to move through it in our own way. And change will continue to happen because of that.
For sure, and change continues for so many reasons, and it's our willingness and ability to adapt that can be so strong. You've explored other healing modalities, Reiki, shamanic healing, psychotherapy, and more. How did you begin to trust yourself in deciding what was helpful or not for your system?
Yeah, well, I started with talk therapy, which seemed really hard at first because we didn't really want to talk. Our past abuse conditioned us not to. And even though we didn't want to, we really, really wanted to. So we thought, how can we communicate in other ways? And we had to be creative in first communicating with ourselves. And once we learned that we needed that, we practiced different ways to communicate with each other and then with our therapist in therapy sessions. Our online community also gave us a place to share experiences and hear other people talking about approaches when therapy is not accessible. So we started adopting a theme of trying, but only if we all agreed to trying and what trying would look like. So we started super duper small. We like sit for a second, draw a line, and leave it. Or look at some Play-Doh instead of pressuring ourselves to build something. And when people say start small, it's really different for everyone. So for us, we wanted to only do something that felt okay to do. So I tried Reiki because somebody I knew offered it to me and we were able to build trust. And she also knew about my system. And because of our success with Reiki with them and how it helped in a very different way that was also complementary to therapy, and also because of hearing other people's experiences, we decided to try shamanic healing. Yeah, it's also important to speak boundaries in some way, even if that means writing it on a piece of paper if you're able to. Because if something isn't working for you, you can take a break. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. And it took us a long time to be able to understand what boundaries were, that we are worthy of having them, that we mattered enough, that we could choose like anything about what we did. We didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, those are some of our initial steps towards being able to try new things that we hoped would help us live the life that we wanted to.
So, how has your academic experience been as an MSW or Masters of Social Work student?
Yeah, sure. So I had an instructor who is by far the most real person as an instructor that I've had so far. By no means is really an academic teacher, but more of an activist. And we sit and talk and learn and do what is morally and ethically the way we should be doing things as social workers. And I've gained a lot of confidence to know that it's okay to call things out that don't sit right with me professionally and learn how to do that in a way that people can hear and feel comfortable enough to hear it. As a student and a new person in the field, and knowing how important that empowerment is really feels really good because we've been having so much hesitancy, knowing how much harm can be caused, and really struggling to find the place in the field that fits for us. My classmates and instructors have generally been amazing, knowing that not a lot about dissociation, dissociative identities, DID, OSDD, etc. are taught in school, and that many therapeutic modalities and approaches that are taught actually exclude or don't consider people with dissociative identities in their studies. So I've tried to share some of our experiences and a plethora of resources online that now exist in our classes. And this is another example of us testing life to find out what's safe enough for us to do and building upon everything else that we've learned for ourselves.
I like how you said that about what situations you're willing to put yourself into. At this time, do you have a final message for listeners?
We're now really hopeful that we can find something meaningful for us and other people that aligns with social work values. Maybe owning our own business, and that feels okay. We'll have to explore how power dynamics and carcerality will impact our career choices and how we operate as a social worker. We're at the point now where we need to be mindful of where and how we spend our limited energy, what situations we're willing to put ourselves into, and whether and how those situations will impact our mental and physical health in the long term.
I like how you said that about what situations you're willing to put yourself into. At this time, do you have a final message for listeners?
Yeah, thank you. Receiving a small ounce of compassion from another can offer enough hope to move, especially when your wounds are relational. Also remember that the Western world as we know it is optimized for conformity. If you don't fit the mold, you're made to feel as though something's wrong with you and that you should hide or isolate until you can be fixed. There's nothing wrong with you. Learning who you are and then finding like-minded and like-hearted people can offer a unique opportunity to thrive authentically. It's not easy, and it can take a long time, a lot of bravery, and many, many tries. And it involves vulnerability and risk, and it can pay off in unimaginable ways. You know yourself best and can learn what you need and don't need in your life at any given time. And trust that over anything else. You will benefit, and others who truly care about you will respect you for it.
Charlotte, I have to say it's been my sincere pleasure to chat with you today. I continue to learn from you, and I know that in a way you're just getting started with these messages. And it's just such a great service to not only the field of social work, but our society. You're able to destigmatize the reality of the circumstance. And I think by doing that, welcome people to have more conversations about things that they really don't know anything about and shouldn't be making assumptions of. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Alex, for this opportunity to share.
I was putting a ton of pressure on myself to do Charlotte's story justice. I felt such deep appreciation for her willingness to share her story and be part of this passion project with me. She was gracious and reassuring as we collaborated to bring this story together. She shared in a follow-up email, "It is a bit rattling to recognize that we are sharing, and I wanted to share that the approach you are taking with this has indeed been helpful in creating a space that feels safe enough to share what we want, while also maintaining boundaries that we want. That is a huge thing for us and thus important to share with you." And so to that, I am very aware that it is my privilege to hear, hold, and share stories. With gratitude, Alex.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Here You Are. If any part of this conversation resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Subscribe, leave a review, send me a message, or share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Wherever you are on your journey, just remember that you are not alone. Keep exploring, keep showing up, and until next time, take care.